guys, here come the dollies. They got fresh sinkers, hot coffee, and the sweetest smile.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Clubmobile.
Hello.
We're very excited for today's episode because we are going to be talking about, I think she's probably one of the most, if not the most recognizable images from World War II and from the Homefront campaign.
Yes, I agree. Even now, I feel like she's one of the most recognizable.
So if you
yeah.
haven't caught on yet, we're talking about Rosie the Riveter.
With the big, strong lady flexing a muscle with a cute
Telling
little
everybody
scarf on
we
her
can
head.
do it.
We can do it. Personally, I preferred the first version
I
by
know you
Norman
preferred the
Rockwell.
original, and I didn't even know that there was another one until we started researching. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that Norman Rockwell painted the original Rosie.
Neither did I. But as soon as I saw it, I felt like that would have attracted me to work more than
Yes.
the other one. As much as I love the imagery of the second one, the original is just so much more badass. She's stamping on a copy of Mein Kampf.
I think the original Rosie really portrays the, what's the word I'm looking for? I think she portrays the literal sense of what the women in the factories looked like. Whereas the popular Rosie, the one that we actually see everywhere, portrays what men wanted the women in the factories to look like.
Yes. And the first one was also scrapped because she was deemed too masculine and too unladylike, which is ironic because that is what the women looked like while working.
They weren't glamorous in the factories.
No, they weren't. Even
you could still tell that they were women.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just pulling it up now, the original Rosie, and I'm looking at her, and she's wearing a jumpsuit, like a pair of denim overalls and a work shirt, which is not too unsimilar to the popular Rosie,
not at all.
He was wearing the work shirt with the sleeves rolled up. She's wearing the denim overalls with the work shirt, and she does not have the handkerchief over her hair. So she's not wearing the red polka dot scarf tied up in her hair, and she's not made up. Whereas popular Rosie's wearing lipstick, and she just looks very put together. She's got trimmed eyebrows, soft feminine features. The Norman Rockwell Rosie is covered in dirt. She's got smudges of dirt all over her arms, all over her face. She's holding a riveter gun in her lap. She's got a pair of welding goggles on her forehead, and she's eating a sandwich. And she's got her foot on a copy of Mein Kampf.
Which I think, honestly, is way more, no.
And I think she really leads she really does give way to the picture of what these women did look like in the factories. You can't tell me that they didn't get covered in dirt at any point, that they weren't, a little dirty, a little, greasy.
Yeah.
That they really just were all prim and perfect every single minute of their workday. But the popular Rosie really was to entice women into the factory, and I guess to let men know that their women were still feminine.
Yeah, it seemed to be that they chose that one to make sure that the women in the factory did maintain a level of femininity, even though they were going in to do the jobs that men had previously done before being drafted or before they enlisted. A lot of men were not happy with women working, leaving the home, earning their own money, particularly those who hadn't been drafted initially, and that was fathers with children a lot of those men that stayed home weren't happy with their wives going out to work in case it interfered with their housework.
Right.
Apparently, they couldn't handle it. So they wouldn't let them fight the war in their own way, if that makes sense. Because I feel like that was such a big thing on the home front is that you can't go, but here's a way for you to help win the war.
Which is, I think that's a loaded statement in the sense that the "you can't go" was at some point not really deemed a "you can't go" by like the military or the government, because there
Yes.
were groups like the Women's Army Corps, there was the SPARS, there was the
Yeah.
Waves, there were the WASPs.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a matter of you can't go because the country won't let you. I think it was more of a matter of you can't go because your husband won't let you.
Yes. That was essentially it. I reading a lot of material about the home front and what Rosie the Riveter did. A lot of it was the husbands not letting them. I've been reading a really great book called Our Mother's War by Emily Yellen, and she had a whole section on Rosie the Riveter. And I found out that the poster was done in a way that obviously she was fictional, a lot like Betty Crocker, but Betty Crocker was made for those women who were going to stay at home, whereas Rosie was made for those women that wanted to go to work.
Right.
And it was a way to show the husbands of the house that they could still juggle everything.
Right. The only thing missing from the end of that statement is we can do it all.
Yes, I agree. We can do
Because
it. We can do
they
all of
really
it.
could do it all. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking at the popular Rosie right now. I have a magnet on my refrigerator and
Mm.
she's across from where I'm sitting. And I'm looking at it and she's, she's flexing her muscle and she's got her sleeve rolled up and
Yeah.
she's got lipstick on and her lips are puckered and she's like, yeah, we can do it. And I really do think that the only thing missing from that statement is the word all at the end, because these women really did it all.
They really did. Nearly 19 million women held jobs during World War II, which I think is a massive, massive number. And a lot of them defied what people thought women were doing during the war. A lot of them were in the factories getting dirty. Um, there were a few that I would say maintained quote unquote traditionally feminine jobs, such as like secretaries and clerks and stuff.
That was the popular job
That was
for a
the more
woman
popular
during the
job for
war. You were a
women.
secretary, you were a waitress.
Yeah.
And when I think they started figuring out that factory work paid more,
Yes, it did. Traditionally,
waitresses, yeah, would earn like $14 or $15 a week.
yeah.
Factory work was almost $40 a week.
Yeah, and in the
That's
grand
a
scheme of
big jump.
things,
That's a big jump in salary for
a
that
really,
time.
really big jump. Yeah. They worked in heavy construction, machinery, lumber and steel mills, as well as physical labor such as unloading freight, building airships, and making munitions. I read something really good in the book I mentioned, Our Mother's War, where obviously a lot of the wives that were working in these factories were building warships, and a lot of the women would double, triple check to make sure that the things that they had built were perfectly safe to be put on the plane itself. And they felt that that was their way of keeping
Keeping their
their
husbands,
husband or
their
boyfriend
brothers, yeah.
safe, which I found
So
really
sweet.
sweet. They refused to like let it go along the line um, until it was perfect. So because they were keeping them safe, which I felt was really cute, actually.
I'm blown away by the fact that the number of women who held a job during the war was almost 19 million women.
19 million. And then the ironic thing is that after the war was won and after everyone's job was done, a lot of these women were laid off.
Yeah. And
And
that's
there
because
was,
Roosevelt was quoted as saying that business as usual was discarded. and that they could not afford to indulge in prejudice.
Yes.
Meaning, in order to keep this country running, it has to be a woman.
Yep.
Because there are less men, and the able-bodied men are serving.
Yep.
And you may have some men that are still working that are maybe, they served in the first war, so they're not eligible to serve in the second war, or their health does not allow them to serve in the Second World War. And okay, there's still some men working at home. But it really was up to the women to keep America going and to
Yeah.
keep munitions and planes and ships being built.
A lot of the propaganda during the war included slogans such as "Do the job he left behind," "Women in the war, we can't win without them." And these campaigns glamorized war work during the labor shortage. And once again, it showed that women could maintain their femininity and still be of use, such as working in factories and being able to maintain the work at home. Um, and then, right at the other end of the spectrum, when the war was won and all these women lost their jobs, propaganda was then aimed to return to normalcy. Once again, telling women that their place was at home in the kitchen, looking after the children and looking after their husband. So you went from we need women to win the war, but now the war is won, it's back to business.
And the propaganda really started to be pushed well ahead of the war being won. I mean,
Yes,
propaganda for return to normalcy began really more in like 44.
it did. Yeah.
And it was like the beginning of 44. The Battle of the Bulge wasn't even secured yet. They had not fought or completed that battle. And they were already telling women, well, it's over.
Yeah. Time to turn
Meanwhile,
around.
there was no victory in Europe for another good year and change.
Yeah.
A year,
It's
year
like,
and a half at that point. So if you're looking at early 44, victory in Europe was May of 45.
yes.
About a year and a half, and you're already getting to the point where you're like, well, if we don't tell them now, it'll be hard. Essentially, it's if we don't tell them now, it'll be harder for them to leave. Or
To
not even
accept
harder for them
it.
to leave, harder for us to get them back into the kitchen.
Yes. It
Harder for
seemed
us to get them back into the kitchen if we don't start now.
it seemed like they only cared for women when they were needed. And on top of that, colored women, black women, they only started to employ African American women when, and I quote, the labor pool of white women had been dried up.
Yeah.
And that caused a whole other controversy within itself, where white women would quit work if they had to work on the same line as an African American woman, therefore making the labor shortage even worse. And that was where the quote came in from Roosevelt, where he said, "We cannot afford such prejudice.
Yeah.
We all need to work to be able to win the war." There was another bit in the book Our Mother's War that I would love to talk about, because I've coined it the village. It was not called the village. I've coined it that purely because I feel like this is what it was. A lot of the women who took jobs were mothers, and of course at that time, if their husband was away at war, they were essentially single mothers.
Right. Married
Um,
single mothers. Yeah.
yeah, so these women pulled together to create a village, helping one another take care of families. And a lot of them began sharing apartments and houses and splitting bills and taking opposite shifts so that one would be always there for the children.
That's amazing.
There was an act introduced into Congress in 1942 called the Lanham Act, and that was for government funds for the establishment of childcare facilities in communities that were most affected by increased war production. And this was daycare and after school care funding for ages 2 to 14. A lot of these daycare centers, luckily, were on site of these factories, such as like the Grumman factory, Curtis Wright, Hudson, and Douglas. And it served 600,000 children in
Wow.
its time. But on the other hand, a lot of the daycare centers were in inconvenient locations, meaning that the mothers couldn't take them. So while they've got this really wonderful thing, subsidized daycare for the first time, a lot of them
Right.
couldn't use it because they had to get there and get to work.
Right.
Um, there were 24 daycare centers established at two Kaiser shipyards. So this was in Oregon and California.
Wow.
And they provided hot meals before and after the shift for mum, and they were on site.
I think that's incredible.
I think so too. And
And
again, it's like helping the mother do the best job they can in both aspects of their life, taking care of them before and after work, making sure they've got a full stomach to do this job on to help win the war.
right.
And then
They
again,
saw the importance of what a woman could do.
yes.
There were, and I mean, I hate to sound like every man ever was against women working and women,
Yeah.
rolling up their sleeves to get out there. That's not the case.
No, a lot of them
A
were really
lot of these
for
men
it.
saw the value in what a woman could do, and they were appreciative of it. So they tried their best to make it easy on them who had children.
Yes. And it
And
was it was
I
easier at
think
first. It was
it
easier at
was
first because a lot of the men that had children were not initially drafted.
right.
And then of course
That changed when
that
America joined the
changed.
war. Yeah.
Yeah. And even before America did join the war, women going to work was supposed to be part of something called a labor lease,
Mhm.
which was that America would help Great Britain build warships and
Yes.
things like that, so that they would essentially be the middleman. So they would build and then ship them. But obviously that didn't come to fruition very quickly because America joined the war
Not long after.
in the middle of all that.
Yeah.
So
I think it goes to show, though, how difficult sometimes it is, even today, for women
mm,
with children who are working.
yeah.
So I mean, a lot of companies still, they provide daycare. The company that I work for, um, surprise, this isn't our full-time job.
I wish it was.
Yes. The company that I work for provides on-site daycare in
That's
a
amazing.
handful of its buildings for parents, not just mothers now, but for parents
That's wonderful.
who need a place for their kids who aren't of school age yet. Um, and I think it's a testament to that fact that they continue on and they do what they can to support, parents with children. But then on the other side, you see a lot of companies where it's not a lot of people in the workforce it's not easy for parents with children.
No.
They have to, and again, a village, ask a neighbor,
Mm,
can you get my kid off the bus? Can you, your daughter's in aftercare, can you take my daughter home with you
yeah.
after school? Or can you, pick my daughter up from basketball practice and I'll pick her up after work? Because
It's
now your
rough.
kids are of school age and they're at that age where they want to be involved in everything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And you have to work,
Yeah.
and you're a two-income household and you work and your husband works. So it's
Yeah.
whichever one of you gets there first.
It's whoever has or it's
So
whoever happened to have the car.
it is still, I guess, ongoing.
Yeah. You would think that after this,
You'd think
especially,
that in this day and age, right, 2025,
yeah.
it would be easier for people with
Yeah.
children. And I'm speaking as somebody who does not have children, but has friends that have children. And I hear this
Mm.
all the time. You think it would be easier for people with children to hold a job and be a parent
And be able to do
and be
everything.
able to enjoy being a parent,
Mm-hmm.
instead that they're stressed,
Yep.
which is what these poor women were doing during the war. They were, pack up a bag, leave the house, make sure that there's lunch for your kid, drop the kid off at the subsidized daycare center, and then you were going to drill rivets into a piece of a B-17, let's just say.
Yeah. And you're tired and you're dirty, and then you still have to go home and
Exactly.
take care of this little person. And in some
Yes.
cases, take care of your husband too.
They were tired, they were dirty, and it was still go home, make dinner, do bath time, do bedtime.
Yeah. Still be the feminine woman you are.
Yeah.
Thanks for today.
The coveralls landed in the hamper, and then you'd put on a house dress and you'd
Yeah.
get about your day.
A sense that's the part I found not offensive about all of it, or all of this. Um, Expectations haven't changed for women And we have moved along so much in the course of all these years. You would think that there would be some progress, but unfortunately, it's still the same. You would think that obviously during wartime, they're giving out subsidized daycare, they're letting women work, they're taking good care of the children in the daycare. You would think that the progress made would carry over to today in more modern times.
You would think.
But unfortunately,
the world, for every bit that the world has changed, it hasn't.
It hasn't. It's kind of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back in a lot
Yes.
of cases.
Yeah. And it's sad.
And these women did so much. They boosted the women's workforce from 12 million to 20 million. They had women, yeah,
That's a
huge
lot.
boost. And the fact that after the war was over, they were like, thanks, bye. But just because the men had come back, and a lot of these men were traumatized, injured, PTSD, even though it obviously wasn't PTSD back
what were
then.
they called back then? Shell shock?
Shell shock, yeah.
But and that's the thing. They would send these women home to your husband's home from war. Now you have to help him. How equipped were these women to deal with shell shock?
Probably
not.
None.
Probably not.
Absolutely none. And they had to go home and take care of their husband after doing all of this. But then their husband was also expected to go back to work through all of that. So really, I feel like they did everyone wrong in this situation.
Yeah.
Honestly.
There's no winners at the end of this.
No, there's no winners at all.
I mean, there were winners, but
at what cost?
At what cost?
Exactly.
At what cost?
I will say though that the drawing of Rosie, it inspired a social movement, and it was so essential to victory.
I mean, what did I say before? She's a magnet.
She's also on my fridge, but it's not with we can do it. It's with it's very independent woman slogan. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Mine says we can do it. I think I bought mine from the World War II Museum in New Orleans. I think I ordered it online.
Mine. Yeah, someone got mine from a Navy museum somewhere. I didn't even buy it. I don't remember where I got it. And I only just clocked that it is Rosie. In the past 2 weeks, I looked at my fridge and I said, oh, wait a minute.
Oh, wait a second.
You have been with me since I was 19.
And that's the thing. We grew, I mean, you and I are of the age where we grew up and Rosie was already well known. Yeah. Well known, and she was popular, and she was somebody that our grandparents grew up with.
Yeah.
Essentially, like my grandmother grew up alongside Rosie, and my aunts whose husbands and brothers served in the war. And as a kid, you don't realize, I feel like we keep saying this, but it's so true. As kids, you don't realize the importance of some of this stuff.
Yeah, you don't clock it until later on.
You just think she's a cool, brave lady, and you're like, yeah, we can do it. And you make a muscle as a kid, and you're like, I can do it.
Yeah.
And now, as women in our 30s, we really do. You see the importance of it. And
yeah, absolutely.
You say the phrase, I can do it in my head, and it's got a completely different meaning.
Yeah.
But it's true. I still feel like she's inspirational. Like, there's, you wake up and you're like, not really feeling it today.
And then Rosie will show you her
bicep. She's staring at you from the fridge when you go to make a cup of coffee, and it's like, okay,
maybe I can do it.
Maybe I can. If you could do what you did, I can get up and go to the office.
I also really love how we spotted yesterday, the day before, where we'd never clocked the W in her elbow for Westinghouse when the ad joined with the Rosie.
And this is the popular Rosie.
Yes.
Has the W in her elbow. Now that we clocked it, I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
I never really would. Yeah, I never saw it. And it's not a very, for everybody listening, since we don't have, videos, but we don't have visual, but we'll throw it up on Instagram for you guys.
Yeah, we'll make sure to post them.
for anybody listening, the W is not, it's not drawn in, it's not, penciled in. It's kind of shaded into the bend of her elbow, the arm that's making the fist. It's kind of just shaded into the, not the crook of her elbow, but the outside.
Yeah.
And I love that I'm like doing this to you on the screen because Winnie and I can see each other, but you guys don't get to see any of this fun stuff. I'm pointing to my elbow for Winnie.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, they're never going to see this.
They're not going to see it.
They're not going to see this,
see
but I'm
it.
just going to keep pointing to my arm anyway.
Here it is.
I'll make a nice little circle around it for everybody so that you can find it.
We could even sketch a W.
We can sketch a W in there for you guys.
So
I'll
that
see what my my Photoshop skills can do.
I would love to share some statistics on women.
Yes, because you know
working.
what? The statistics, I'm looking at them. The statistics are crazy.
They are. Like I said, the impact of the Rosie character boosted the women's workforce from 12 million to 20 million. By 1944, 1.7 million unmarried men between the ages of 20 and 34 worked in the defense industry, while 4.1 million unmarried women between those ages did so. So even just between the men and the women there were more women working than men. Obviously, this was because a lot of the able-bodied men were enlisted. But still, 4.1 million.
This is just in America.
So this is just in the USA, yeah.
Remember, this is just in America. There were women who worked in factories in Europe. So you have to essentially look at the bigger picture, and like Rosie was just for the States. I mean, she's all over now. You catch her in every country.
Everywhere.
But at the time, she was only there to promote this in the United States. But there were, and I would venture a guess that there were an equal number of women doing the same jobs in the UK. Actually, I'm going to look it up. I want to look up the number of women that worked in the UK.
Yes, I believe the equivalent was called Lumberjill, but I'm not entirely sure of that.
Let's see. This says Rosie the Riveter was an American cultural icon, not British. However, there were similar images of women working in factories and shipyards in Britain during World War II.
I feel like it wasn't such a big thing in England to not go to work. You just sort of did.
They were called lumberjills.
Yes.
But
there's no picture. There's no, like, there was no cartoon to attract them into work.
No, no painting, no cartoon. These are just pictures of regular women.
Yeah, it was sort of a we're at war, get it together, go to work.
They look more akin to land army girls than factory workers.
Yeah.
These women, in their own right, these women are wielding axes and sawing pieces of trees, from what I'm looking at. And badass in their own right.
Oh, absolutely.
There is one photo of a woman. She is like holding up a whole piece of a
whole piece of lumber,
big piece of lumber by herself.
Oh yeah, it was. I feel like as much as I love the cartoon and the drawing of Rosie, I kind of like that there was no or minimal attraction to get the women to work in England. It was sort of a very English pull your bootstraps up. We're at war. All the men have gone. It's your turn. It wasn't like a please come to work. It was a
which I think is definitely more of an English thing than
it really is more of an English thing.
Even today in America, they're like, please come work.
Yeah. Whereas in England, it's like, get it together.
I guess our country now is still begging people to go to work.
Yeah, they really are.
For whatever reason. But so lumberjills, and
there were lumberjills, yeah.
Oh, they were the Women's Timber Corps.
That's it.
They had, and they were a division of the Land Army.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
There it is.
There we go. And they were active from 42 to 46.
Which is quite late, I think, obviously, because England
For
joined the
the
war.
war for them, yes.
Yeah, it's quite late
Um,
on.
this says Women's Timber Corps in World War II, 1942 to 1946. Ah, see, there's a book on them.
Oh,
Lumberjills, Britain's Forgotten Army. And this says in the 1940s, people did not believe women could work in forestry. I guess that's echoing that people did not believe women could work in factories either.
yeah.
They were laughed at, they were ridiculed, and their competence was questioned.
Mm.
So I think it really does not matter which side of the ocean you were on during the
Yeah,
war.
doesn't matter where you're
Women
from.
women were looked at as incapable or not able-bodied,
Yeah,
and they were regarded as the fairer sex, expected to be gentle, polite, quiet, coy, and feminine,
which is quite offensive,
which
actually.
goes back to something I said to you the other day, that really any woman that worked in any capacity during the war was very much expected to make sure you have your perfume on, make sure your hair is done, make sure your
Mm.
lipstick is on, because if you're going to do this, you're going to look like a lady.
I don't think there were any set rules in the factories of things like that, but it was more socially expected.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think there was like a specific thing laid out. A lot of the posters in the factories were that the loose lips sink ships. And there was a picture I sent you, Gabby, from the Museum of Flight, where it was they couldn't cuss on the line, and we both said that that would never happen for you and I. There was a poster
Yes, they were
in
not
the Museum
allowed.
of Flight
They
in
weren't
Seattle.
allowed to
Couldn't cuss on the line.
no
No
foul
foul
language at work,
language.
which if
Yes.
that was today, we'd both be out of a job.
We would instantly both out of
Instantly, we'd
work.
both be out of a job.
I
Um,
also really like learning that a lot of these factories were made to look like the exterior of the land they were on. So they were like blended in case of air raids or anything.
yeah,
Um, the Douglas factories were painted to look like they were in a forest. And the Boeing factory here in Seattle obviously blended into the exterior too of, mountainous
right.
areas and blue skies and what have you. Um, so that must have been terrifying. Again, women are risking themselves and their lives to make sure that
Yeah.
the war is won.
The fear of that, the air raids and all that in the States. I
Yeah,
mean, essentially the home front was obviously I feel like the women working in the factories here in the States versus the women that were working in the factories in Britain, maybe in the one sense had a bit less. They didn't know obviously at the time that they were less in the line of fire than the women in the UK. But looking back now,
yeah,
we can see that, once America joined the war, they took their fighting overseas.
yeah.
But
A lot of the women in England were obviously aware of their line of fire because they had been through the Blitz. They had, been through all of it for years and years up until America joined
Mhm.
the war. I'd also really like to take notice of the fact that also non-white women worked in these factories. And like I said before, it was only when the pool had run dry. Jim Crow laws were still very much in place during this time.
Yes.
And like I've mentioned earlier, that a lot of white women were not happy to work with those non-white women. African American workers were some of the most affected by the need for women workers. A lot of them quit their jobs as cleaners and things like that to be
Mhm.
able to work in factories. So they would quit for the higher wage, and a lot of them would be turned away at the door purely based on the fact that they were not white. It's been said that the process of whites working alongside Black people during the time encouraged a breaking down of social barriers and a healthy recognition of diversity. So when they did let colored people work, it gave something of a breaking down of a social barrier.
Which, I mean, and even if you look at it that way, how long after that, right? How long after the war before segregation really was
Yeah.
gone?
A lot of the women believed that they all had a patriotic duty and they all had a hand in helping the men overseas to win the war. So a lot of them just did not give a care. They said we're all here to do the same exact job. There's no time to be prejudiced. There's no time to be racist. We're all here to do one thing. But of course, there were some women that did not take heed of that.
No.
But
that's the way, that's unfortunately the way of the world.
The way of the world at the time.
Yeah. Fortunately, it's sometimes still the way of the world now. But
yeah,
that's
there's a really interesting quote I found by someone called Leah J. Rupp. And she said, for the first time, the working woman dominated the public image. Women were riveting housewives in slacks, not mother, domestic beings, or civilizers. And the fact that they were laid off or essentially discharged from the war after the war was won, and made to go right back to being mother, domestic being.
Right back to the kitchen.
It's kind of a slap in the face, honestly. There was one woman who stayed at her job for a further 50 years. She was known as the final Rosie. And I believe she built warships. I'm not entirely sure what her job turned into post-war, but she did stay.
Let's find out.
In the workforce. Pause.
She only recently just passed away. 2023.
Wow.
And she worked for Boeing.
Oh, okay.
American factory worker. She was an American factory worker who was an original Rosie. She built airplanes for over half a century and spent many years working for Boeing before retiring at age 95. She was known as the last serving Rosie the Riveter. So she was only retired for 9 years.
That's insane.
She worked for her whole life.
Love that for her.
Born in 1919. Retired at age 95. Passed away in 2023 at the age of 104.
That's something.
We should all be that strong.
I would love to be. Absolutely. I don't want to be working.
I don't want to say we should all be that dedicated to our job.
Yes, agree.
Because not every job is someplace you want to stay until you're 95. But we should all have that much inner strength within us. And that desire to keep breaking barriers. That's what I'll say.
Yes, I agree.
Because I don't want to stay at my job until I'm 95.
No, thank you.
But she's inspiring.
She really is.
This says that by 2014, she had worked on every single C-17 plane at the Boeing plant and retired in November of 2014.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah. She was honored in November of 2014. She was honored for her contributions to the military with the Lillian K. Keel Award from the American Veterans Center. And she received that special award with 8 other honorees. She was honored by the California State Assembly as the 70th Assembly District Woman of the Year in 2014.
Wow.
And she received the Air Force Association's 2017 Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual Airspace and Cyber Conference in September of 2017.
Again, all these women are awarded way later than they should have
In
been.
2019, a bar named after Eleanor Otto opened in Long Beach, California,
Okay, I love that.
where she was born.
That's amazing.
She was born in
Um,
Los Angeles, but Long Beach is close enough. Yeah.
off the back of her being awarded, in 2014, Phyllis Gould, one of the original Rosie the Riveters, visited President Barack Obama in support of National Rosie the Riveter Day. The United States Senate approved the observance on March 21st in 2017. She also pushed for a gold medal for Rosies, and that was given starting 2022.
Right. Which we shared that video on our Instagram.
We did, yeah.
That is such a beautiful video.
It really is. I was once again trying not to cry, trying to keep my tears in. There's something about little old women.
It's getting increasingly hard. It's getting increasingly harder, A, as I get older, and B, as we dive into more of this, to not get very emotional about it,
Yes.
because you really start to see how much people suffered during the war, and that it didn't just affect the people that were the men that were fighting.
Yes, it also
It didn't just
affected the
affect the
women
people that were on, over there
in combat.
in
Yeah.
combat. It really affected everybody.
Here's something I also found really sweet. In 2014, a nationwide program run by the organization Thanks, Plain and Simple, was founded to encourage cities to pick up a project that Rosies can do with younger generations. This was in order to educate young people about women's roles in World War II and to involve these Rosies, many of whom had become isolated as they had gotten older, in community projects. And reading that made me emotional because I'm thinking of them by themselves with all this information to share, all these anecdotes, and this amazing thing that they did to do their part, which is what they were encouraged to do. We can do it, do your part. And I also feel like the younger people that were involved in the project were really lucky to get a first person account
Oh, yeah.
and a first person sort of review of what they did during the war. It's just absolutely wonderful. I think it's very sweet. Like despite the workforce falling from 36% to 28% in 1947, these women made a revolution begin.
They
A
did.
revolution started in working life and home life. Women enjoyed that taste of their own independence, their own money. They did not have to rely upon a man. And I think, even though we have said that, yes, the daycare thing didn't carry over or the village didn't carry over, that
Right.
is what carried over from these women essentially sacrificing their time and, in a lot of cases, their lives,
Yeah,
was that we get to be independent.
we do. We do get to be independent. It's something that I'm proud of.
Because if you think about it, it had only been about 20 something years since women had received the right to vote. That happened
Yeah.
in the 20s. So to go from women can't vote and own property to now they're earning their own money and they have their own independence in terms of working. What a leap.
It's true.
And a lot of the women were reluctant to go back to either lower paying roles or to household chores. A lot of them stayed in the workforce, but they went into administration positions.
Because you start to see what you're capable of.
Yes, exactly.
I
You
can do
start to
more than
see.
just make a mean roasted chicken for dinner. I
Now
can,
I can do both. Now I'm able to build part of a
right?
flying fortress and
I
I could go home and make a really good roast chicken dinner.
There
Try
it
me.
is. Right. Can you
There
do
it
that?
is. No, I can't build a flying fortress. Would love to, but I can make a good chicken.
Yeah, same.
I can do one or the other. Like it depends on the day. I'm tired. Depends on what's going on through the day. I can make the chicken. Could I build a B-17? Ah, I'd give
That's
it a
debatable.
try. I'd give it a try. I'd give it a good college try.
Yeah, the old college try.
I really would.
I want to give real quick a shout out because there's two groups on Instagram that we follow that are dedicated to the Rosies. And the first one is the Rosie the Riveter Association. And they're a nonprofit organization, and they are American Rosie the Riveter Association, recognizing and preserving the history and legacy of working women, including volunteer women during World War II. Their job essentially is to keep these women's legacy alive.
That's
And
beautiful.
I think that they're doing such a good thing. And they share a lot of stories. You get a lot of photos of Rosies that are still alive now, that are still donning their red polka dot scarf over their head.
Oh, yes.
And,
Cute.
making their best muscles. And I think it's just,
That's
if you guys are not
adorable.
following them on Instagram, I think you should give them a peek.
Yes, I
And the
agree.
other is the Rosie the Riveter Trust. And they're also a nonprofit organization, and they honor the legacy of all Rosies and supporting Rosie the Riveter World War II home front. And they are a national historical park. So they also are the Rosie National Historical Park in Richmond, California. And they also do their best to honor the Rosie legacy, and with the aspect of the historical park, get people involved in their community and in preserving that legacy.
I really love that.
So again, if you guys are not following them, and we can link them both on our Instagram as well, they're both
Yes,
100% worth the follow.
I agree. There's so much information. I feel like a lot of it that we got for this episode was little bits and pieces from them, the things that they post, along obviously with our own research, along obviously with books we're reading and media we're taking in. A lot of it was kind of tidbits from both of those accounts too. So
Yeah.
it's only right that we give them a little shout.
Yes, because they are keeping that Rosie name alive. I think that they're doing a wonderful job. If you guys are not following those two Rosie accounts on Instagram, we'll make sure that you get their information. And just remember that you can do it. Whether
You can do it,
whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, I
whether
think
you're anybody.
anybody, I think the message here at the end of the day is that whatever it is that's standing in front of you, you can do it.
You can do it, even if it
Because
seems difficult.
that's what Rosie symbolizes. That
That's what Rosie would want.
no matter how hard it is, you can get through it. And then you could look back on it and say that you did it.
Do what we did. Get a magnet for your fridge and have her look menacingly at you as you pour coffee.
Yeah, that helps.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you stay tuned. We have some really exciting things coming up that we are super excited to share with you.
Please, if you're not following us already on Instagram, stay tuned over there because we'll be sharing some fun stuff. And we do truly appreciate all of you. So thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.